HGO, Houston Grand Opera, presents the rarely performed opera Falstaff. And I find that interesting because I thought it was a heck of a good show. This is Dr. David D. Shine, and welcome to the special edition of Starstruck as we keep our audience up to date on some local and national theater and arts events. Falstaff is a very different opera. Some of my regular audience know that one of my running jokes about operas is it was a typical opera, everybody died. Well, how about a comedic opera where nobody dies? Yes. This was the last of Verdi's 28 operas, and true opera fans complain that he should have stopped before he got to number 28. And I don't agree with them because it's not the majestic music that Verdi is associated with for the especially the die-hard opera fans and those fans of classical music, because this is that genre for Verdi. But this tends more to fit with kind of a Broadway production, and the creative sets and the great costumes. It was more like a Broadway production. And I want to give credit to Adrian Linford of the Los Angeles Opera Company, who did the sets and the costumes. The plot is based on Shakespeare's comedy, The Merry Wives of Windsor, and also parts of Henry IV. Our lead character, Falstaff, is played and sung masterfully by baritone Reginald Smith Jr. He's a down-on-his-luck knight, and he decides, yes, folks, this is the plot, he decides that dating some rich women would be a good idea. So he writes identical letters to two rich but married women. The two women played very nicely by soprano Nicole Heaton as Alice and mezzo-soprano Emily Treagle as Meg find out about the bungling Falstaff's plan when they get to compare the letters that they each got. And they set out a complex plot to make sure they embarrass Falstaff in public. Now, there's a parallel plot. Of course, we always have to have extra plots. Caius, performed by tenor Martin Beccari, is a candidate for the hand, and of course he's a much older man than the young woman due to an arranged marriage by Alice's husband, Ford, sung by baritone Blake Edwards. And the setup is they're going to try and fix up the old dock with their daughter, Nanetta. The unfortunate damsel is the show stealer in this particular production. It's played by soprano Andrea Carroll, who's in love with Fenton, played by tenor Jack Swanson. In other words, she's in love with a fellow who's more appropriately her age. Well, of course, the dad doesn't have that on his list. So the story moves forward, and the wives succeed in fooling Falstaff, and he ends up being dumped in the river, and you have to watch the show to see how that all comes about. Now, they're not done with him. They get him to show up later in a ridiculous costume wearing horns, and they plan to embarrass him yet again. Confusion rages across the stage, is filled with close to about 50 people on stage in the big wrap up in the third act. And then somehow there's a marriage scene, right at the end, and the father, Ford, blesses the marriage of Nanetta and Fenton, of course, instead of forcing her to marry Caius. This play is more like a three-ring circus and then a traditional opera. Credit for the flow of the show goes to director Paula Suozzi. Well, how about the music? The show featured the full HGO orchestra led by the accomplished Patrick Summers, who, of course, is the HGO favorite of both the orchestra members and the public. And this was very well performed. It is great to hear that full orchestra. Again, many opera critics don't feel it's the best opera music, but it is beautiful, and it was interesting to listen to. Now, one of the things that happened here is because of these large sets and the changes of sets, they had musical interludes during certain breaks, and they played pieces of other famous pieces. So the orchestra get to perform a little extra during these interludes. I thought it was fine. I heard some members of the audience complain that they thought it was a waste of time. To each his own. So again, this is an opera for those who perform more of a show than a traditional opera. It might bring some non-opera people to more operas in the future. My disclaimer, I buy my own tickets to performances covered, do not identify myself as a theater reviewer, and never promise to do a review. Dr. Dave awards HGO 5 stars for its production of Falstaff. If you've enjoyed this presentation, please subscribe on your favorite platform.